Progress.
Not yet.
You pledge the flag?
Yeah, no, we don't. No, we don't.
Oh my God. Travis, you guys pledge the flag?
No, we don't. No.
Okay. I'm just so used to it.
Hold on.
See, that gets so stupid. I don't know how. You get that off there, Travis. You got it too. How do you get that off?
Just have to say continue.
I hit that, but not having it.
We have a
Oh,
problem.
use the, oh,
Audit.
Jim?
thank you. Okay, I thought you had to just hit it.
Jim?
Jim.
Yes.
I can't get to YouTube because once we upgraded me to 11, I can't get to YouTube. Let's do this.
How you feel? Good. I'm here. It's working out. I have to be better by the weekend. I gotta
So you're gonna work Saturday nights then.
I don't know what it
The
is.
month of March would be Saturday nights doing that, right?
reset. Well, no, it's just this weekend. Yeah.
I don't even know how.
Oh,
to
really? Well,
get
Friday,
next weekend,
Saturday,
you and your
See,
wife
usually
have
when I do this,
dinner going on.
I
But
hit
save the
Zoom,
date.
What?
And I
is
go
this
here,
weekend?
live on YouTube, and I
It-
automatically-
Well, we're running a special 2 weekend,
so,
so I'm back open now.
Not the first of it.
Channel.
I'm doing, no, it's the next weekend after this
Right.
weekend.
I didn't even think.
I got invited to go.
as
What,
average.
what changed? Yeah.
I went from Windows
Oh,
10 to Windows
saw that.
11.
Three leaders, myself.
See, it's not recognizing.
Yeah, that's good.
This is my.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a week from this coming Saturday.
I don't even know what the email and stuff is.
Can you put your phone number in? Sure.
I'm hoping it's this.
My wife's been really ill with this too. I know mine's a cold.
Oh, sorry.
I've had the flu shot. Mhm.
Hoping this is that. Don't forget password. What is, there is no click on.
We're muted.
That's password.
I'm muted.
Oh, thank you. I don't know. Mm.
It looked really nice.
over at houses. And it was nice. It was 80. Oh, it's 100 houses. It was like out of the way out of here. And then there was a grocery chain down there. Publix. I don't know if you've ever been down
Or wait a minute,
there. Every week they offer 2 for 1
next.
beer. And
Oh, this is good.
my wife's going.
Ways.
But, you know, I found shade everywhere. I'm like, sun's been-
I have my house. I haven't built a house. My goal, so we don't.
We're gonna have to upload the Zoom link.
Hmm?
80K.
We could take the broadcast and.
Thank you for calling Adriatic Technical Solutions.
And I'll just have him work on it in the background.
Wait while I transfer your call.
And then once he has it set, he'll let me know.
It just won't be live.
Right. Not until he gets them straightened out. She's not there. So I will get with email texting me while we, once we get this on.
But we, the Zoom will still be live.
Yeah, the Zoom will still be live. Yeah, unfortunately, sorry.
Hmm?
Some pieces up there that are upgraded. All right, well, why don't we start, as long as we're on Zoom. Okay. Yeah, we ought to start.
Yes, it's recording.
Are you ready for me to start now?
Mhm.
Okay. I'll start my part. All right.
I got it. Oh, it's Kevin.
Okay. All right, we'll call this annual meeting of the Warren County Local Development Corporation together. I would like to appoint the committee members for 2022. There will be Peter McDevitt, Chairman, Eugene Merlino, Craig Leggett, Brad McGowan, Michael Wild, Robert Landry, and Travis Whitehead. Next, I will turn it over to the Audit and Finance Committee.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Leggett?
Audit and Finance Committee consists of Gene Merlino, Craig Leggett. So Gene, you have the finance report here. Our duties at this point in time are to accept the review and make recommendation of approval for the 2021 audited financial statements. Do you have any questions?
Can you talk to the? We can't hear you, Craig.
Sorry,
There you go.
there we go.
I heard you though.
There we go.
Actually, I really don't have any questions. I know there's probably going to be some, but we all think of it a different way, but I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. And in speaking with the auditor yesterday and reviewing this, all looks good. I do not have any concerns about this one. In our packet here on the audit, I would like, for our audit committee here, Gene, to note that on page 15, under the heading of compliance and other matters, that on the very last sentence, the results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under the government auditing standards. So they felt good with that. And then also on page 19 is a checklist of the summary of the auditor's results that show that things are all in order. So kudos to the EDC staff who maintain all of our financials for having thing all in compliance and in good shape. Gene, you want to move that we accept and recommend?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So, good. We'll adjourn to the annual meeting of the Warren County LDC.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank-
Audit and Finance.
Thank you
have-
very much,
turned it
Supervisor
over.
Leggett. Welcome to our annual meeting of our Board of Directors. Our first resolution is to approve our officers for the coming year. Chair being Peter McDevitt, Vice Chair Mike Wild, Treasurer Craig Leggett, Assistant Treasurer Jean Merlino, and Bob Landry as Secretary. Can I get a motion to approve the election of officers? Those
I'll make that motion.
Supervisor Merlino. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second, Supervisor Leggett.
Oh.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next issue is the committee appointments, and I've put together you might describe it as a roster of membership, which you may have gotten a late email from me yesterday, but basically the following is what I am proposing, okay, in terms of the governance committee. That would be Craig Leggett, Brad McGowan, and Travis Whitehead. Our audit and finance committee would be Jean Merlino, Bob Landry, and Mike Wild. So that is what I am proposing in terms of our governance and audit and finance committee. And I would maybe ask for a motion to get them on the floor for discussion.
So moved.
Supervisor
I'll
Leggett,
second.
seconded by Supervisor Merlino. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The,
There's also the Business Review Committee and professionals retained.
yeah, thank you very much. In our packet, as part of what we have here, we have some 2022 committee members, our Business Review Committee. Those include Mike Borges, Tim Lasarso, Mark Yarsha, Michael Murray, and Laura Ledoux. And those would be our Business Review Committee members as proposed. Can I get a motion to that effect, please? Supervisor Wild, seconded by
Sure.
Supervisor Leggett. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
As far as professional retained and approved relationships, they also are listed in our package. As far as our certified public accountant, that's the EFPR group in Williamsville, New York, who Supervisor Leggett spoke to one of their accountants yesterday. Our general counsel would be McCarthy Law. Our special counsel would be Harris Beach. And our banking institutions would be our two local facilities, Glens Falls National Bank and TD Bank. Can I, in order to get some discussion, can I get a motion to get those following?
I'll make that motion.
Supervisor Wild, seconded by Supervisor Merlino. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Hold on. I would like to point out that in the monthly meeting, you will see a proposed RFQ to evaluate other legal support for the coming year. But given the fact that that procurement policy will take some time to execute, it's appropriate for us to move forward with the legal representation that we currently have so that we're reflecting what is present tense. But I do want to clarify that it's our intention to help the board at least evaluate what its other options are for legal support.
Thank you, Jim. The approval, number 3, approval
Oh.
of annual report.
Vote. Do we vote?
Yes, you need to vote.
Did we
need
vote?
to
No, you need to vote on that.
Okay, voting on the last resolution, please. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Discussion?
Yeah.
No. I'm ready.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Nope. Very good. Approval of annual report, Jim. Number 3.
Catch up with where we are. Okay. If you want to walk them through what they have in their packets, Linda.
Okay, this is your mission and measurements. So the top part is the mission of the Warren County LDC. And the measurements is what happened last year. Okay, we had 4 applications that came in, actually inquired. There was no applications submitted, none were received, none were approved, none were denied. So that's where the 4 and all the zeros came from. Dollar amounts of business loans closed. We didn't have any because we didn't close any loans last year. There was no grants given out, no new jobs were committed because we didn't have any new applicants. No jobs were retained because we didn't have any applications or new loans. There was no private sector investment. The percentage of business loan portfolios held at current payment status is at 80%. Number of household assisted, non-applicable, and amount of housing loans closed was 0 because we didn't do anything with housing on loans.
Very good. You,
Mr. Chairman, are you done, Lynn? With your report?
Gene, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, In the follow-up on a little bit of
Yeah,
this,
Go ahead, Gene. Yeah.
I'll give you some positive.
Yes.
I did some research the last week or two. Lake Luzerne, a business in Lake Luzerne, Netto Meadows, got a grant from us for 115,000. I'll call it 2018, the last week of 2017. They didn't put any reports of any employees because they were just had to reconstruct this building and they had to do a lot of maintenance to it and they had a lot of work to it. And it's really a pleasure for me to report on this because I was involved in this highly. They are now open. They are now making cheese in Lake Luzerne. And speaking to Sheila Flanagan, the owner, she reported to me the other about, I actually was in the Chronicle. She's got 30 employees working. And you know, they got one big problem, parking. So that's going to be, we're going to have to work on that. They got 30 employees working and and she said a few part-time workers. So from a 0, next time this comes out, we should have a 30 on there. Second thing about that place, they just won a world champion competition in making cheese. 3,000 people from all over the world submitted cheese to be tested or weighed on. They came in within the top 10 on one of their cheeses called Kunin. Now, I might be saying that wrong, but it's Kuwik. That's the way I'm told it's supposed to say. And they're thrilled about it. And they've have won cheese awards before. But from Warren County, Lake Luzerne, a world-class cheese, phenomenal. So that's, and I think if anybody read the Chronicle, there's a 4-page thing in the Chronicle last week of cheese making and all the things, basically what I just said too. So it's a great article to read and we're really proud to have them in Lake Luzerne. And because of this organization got them off the ground, it's one of the good success stories that we could have. And I'm not happy with all we just heard about last year. I know it's hard to make changes, and I know Mr. Scipion took over, but I've been on this committee and with Craig for a long time. And when it first got started, I got reports in here. I got a letter from Mr. Whitehead, and I tried to investigate it, and I have all the things about that letter. But I'll give you, and we can get some information. When the LDC got started, I have all the stuff, the LDCs. And Len Fosbrook was the first LDC person until he retired. And then, yeah.
Ed?
Huh?
Ed Bartholomew?
Ed Bartholomew took over. Now, Ed ran it in a different way than it's going today, and I will really say. But we had meetings every month. We gave out money every month. Some were successful, some weren't. Not basically because we picked the wrong people, but just the times. And in everything I read, all the resolutions, the county has nothing to do with the leadership of the LDC or the EDC. That is an organization on its own. The only thing the county has is the responsibility of chairman of the board to put some of us on the committee. There's nothing in anything I read saying who has to be, who appoints a deputy or who appoints chairman of the LDC. And, you know, we did a change in bylaws last year, and unfortunately I wasn't here for quite a few of those meetings. I was sick, but you know, I think that's all done now. And I'd like to see this year start. Let's get this thing rolling. I mean, it's got to be people out there that have, now that the pandemic is coming down and things are rolling along. It's unbelievable. I went to New Jersey the other day. There was more tractor trailers on the road than there was cars on the highway. So goods are moving, and I think the country is going to really start coming out of everything. So that's something I have to say. And I think we're doing a great job. And I say we, all of us. But there was nothing I found to say, because I know Travis asked me how did Mr. Scipion get on the board? I didn't know. I just followed it from Glenn and Ed Bartholomew. Ed was a funny guy, and you took over a tough job because Ed had everything up here and not on paper. And so to take over something with monies and all that stuff and learn the ways of this, I applaud you, and I hope you continue. That's all.
Thank you, Gene, for those comments. Travis, do you have something?
I'm not exactly sure what Gene might be getting at here, but
Travis, can you pull your mic
oh,
closer? I can't hear.
sure.
I'm sorry, I got a cold.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm not exactly sure what the point is here, but as far as what I had mentioned in the past about do we have a CEO, still never got that answer. We can take care of that right now. I'll put it forward if you want, that we have Mr. Siplin be our CEO, but it seems according to our bylaws that we need to do that. And that's what I'm asking about is, you know, was there ever a resolution? I never got to see one. Never even got to see one for Mr. Bartholomew, but maybe it exists. But I think it's something we need to do according to the bylaws, and we can do it, and we can do it right now, as far as I'm concerned.
And I agree, I agree with you 100%. There's
Yeah.
nothing that says who appoints these people in everything I have, and I'll give it to you.
No, we appoint according to the bylaws. It's
Well,
right in-
now with the new bylaws,
Even the old
not
ones.
back in the old days, we never appointed, it was always whoever was EDC was able to do LDC when that came on board. The only part of the county has is funding this group. So if there's anything different, I didn't find it in any of these
I can show it to you.
resolutions. So, but I would, if you make that motion, I would second it.
I'll make the motion.
Discussion.
I guess point of order, it's not necessarily on the agenda, and we're on a whole different topic of business. I think there was a review of the
Mission and measurements.
the professional retained approval. Yeah, mission and measurement report is where we are now. Perhaps there's time later in the meeting
Okay.
to get on
That's
something
fine.
like
So
that.
if you guys can, near the end of the meeting, if you want to bring it up.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll let Travis.
I would offer one other point. I was curious about this too. I referred to both legal counsels. I got an answer from one. When the LDC files its paperwork every year with the state, one of the things that it describes in those deliverables is not only the committee and board members, but also the officers of the organization that manage it. It's not just true of me. Linda is named, our CFO or financial leader is named. Every year that's approved by this board and submitted to the state. That's done by resolution. As far as the legal advice that I was given is that meets the requirements that the state has. That does not necessarily mean that we are following whatever process that you deem appropriate for managing the LDC itself. But as far as the state goes, our submittals every year that depict what the officers are of the organization that manages it suffices. Only offer that for context.
Thank you. Travis?
Yeah, so if I can clarify this, on the very next page in your packet, it says additional questions. And question number 2 is, who has the power to appoint the management of the public authority? And the answer is the board of directors has the power to appoint the management. So I think that takes care of Mr. Leggett's concern there. And, you know, this probably would be the appropriate time to make that appointment. So you know, it's the board, you know, you said that you couldn't find it, but according to this, that's what it's.
Well, I'm only going by what resolutions the county made. They're only,
Yeah, they
know.
haven't made any as far as I can see, but it says clearly in the bylaws that we have the power to do it from time to time, it says. So, and here it says in the questions, the board of directors has the power to appoint the management. I'm not opposed at all to seeing that done. I'd like to see things done properly, that's all. And
well, we're gonna wait.
Great.
We have to wait till the end, or you want to make the motion now?
Yeah,
Get it over with.
not to be a stickler here, but we are in the annual meeting, the board of directors, and we're on number 3, approval of annual
Yep.
report. So our job right now at this point in time is the approval of the annual report, which includes mission and measurement report. And the fact that there is something that says the board of directors has the power to appoint the management does not trigger a need to appoint the management during this report out.
Okay,
I agree with you, Craig. Let's bring it up later on in the meeting
Yep,
if
we'll do
we
it.
can, please.
we'll get it done today.
Jim, any further as it relates to,
I don't know that we need to walk through them all because the majority of these things have stayed relatively stable from year to year. I would point out that the report of accomplishments, which follows the document that Linda just walked us through, this provides a little more discretion for us to be able to provide things that are not directly answerable to the state format. I'd point out perhaps most importantly that 3 loans were paid off during the course of the year. None of them were deemed collectible. I do think that we still have some decisions around that facing us. One thing that we don't talk a lot about, but we are a supporter of and a direct sponsor of is the Startup ADK Entrepreneurial Program, which we do in concert with Washington County and SUNY Adirondack. They've had 2 cohorts during the course of the year. We, as the LDC staff, engage with them to provide them access to potential resources the LDC would have. And then in a different capacity as the EDC staff, we oftentimes provide business assistance to anybody that's attempting to build a business plan or advance a business. I do think perhaps the most important thing is that we spent a great deal of our time last year evaluating our own processes and we had a full bylaws review. There was a lot of questions about many of the fundamental definitions of the organization. I believe we're largely through that. There was a fair amount of conversation about potential areas that we could explore as the needs of the community and of the economy evolve. We're going to hear later in our regular meeting about some of those. And I, like Board Member Merlino, I'm really looking forward to the idea that in the coming year that we would potentially evaluate a number of things that for determine whether they're appropriate for the LDC to either fund or be involved with, but that would help us adapt to the changing needs in the business community. We are commenting on the fact that if you look back at not only the meeting minutes, but the meetings themselves, you'll see that we had a fair amount of conversation about this potential in the past year. And it's time in the coming year for us to hopefully be able to convert that to some additional either actions or programs that we have available, whether they address housing, whether they address other aspects of economic assistance post-pandemic. It is clear that those funds are winding down. I would also offer for context, although it's not listed in the report, that almost all loan funds, when talking to my peers, had very diminished activity over the last 2 years. So it is contextual for the experience of this particular LDC to have had little or no formal applications. There was a significant amount of grant funds that were available through other channels, which became the primary source for assistance to businesses. In fact, the EDC opened a revolving loan fund of itself on its own at the beginning of the pandemic and also received no applicants for that because there were stipulations that would not allow it to be a pure grant. That period of time, while it's not captured in the report, is important to remember for purposes of context. I don't believe that that is a sustainable trend. When we talked to the Lake Champlain, Lake George Planning Board, they also had their own revolving loan fund. And while they did have some applicants during the course of the year, they struggled too to push out money at 1.9% over the last 18 months. So it is not unusual to have this level of activity. But I am hopeful and do believe that in the coming year, it's going to be dramatically better.
Thank you, Jim.
So the rest of the deliverables that you'll see here, whether it be the board performance evaluations or the policies, I think are there for you. The board performance evaluation is a check sheet which has stayed the same from year to year. It's there for you to fill out. Linda will administer that process. All you're approving today is the format by which that is done. And then the rest of this particular section on the policies are the policies that are associated with the LDC. As far as I can tell, they have stayed completely consistent. While we did update our bylaws, there was no changes in the bylaws that required changes in our processes or policies. So I believe that everything that you see here under the approval of the annual report with the updates on the mission and measurement and on the report of accomplishment should be relatively consistent and hopefully, the same as what you've seen in the past.
Thank you, Jim. Can I get a motion then to approve the annual report as verbalized by Mr. Sepulveda?
The annual report,
Yeah, right.
all 26 pages there?
No, it's the number 3.
Yeah, what year?
bottom.
This part here is later in the agenda.
Okay.
So it goes all the way down through conflict of interest in your
Correct.
packet.
Thank you, Karen. So we have a motion by Supervisor Wild. Do I have a second to that motion, please?
Sure.
Supervisor Leggett, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Number 4, approval of investment report and policy, Jim.
Make our way to there.
Yeah, that's the next. So this part right here,
Yeah, I'm trying to get there.
which is the next after your conflict of interest, is going to be your investment policy and report.
There we go.
Again, as far as I can tell, there's been no material changes in this from the prior year. So to summarize this essentially captures the policies by which we, as your agent, manage the funds. We review these with you every single month. I think perhaps the most significant change in the way that we did this has been the addition of greater sweep out activity to ensure that any accounts that get above the FDIC insured level are moved so that we 100% of, or as close to as 100% of the assets of the LDC are fully insured under FDIC provisions. But in terms of the vehicles that we would invest your money in, or the institutions, all of that has stayed exactly the same.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to, for number 4, the approval of our investment report and policy? Supervisor or Travis with the motion,
Yeah.
seconded by Supervisor Merlino. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Number 5, approval of procurement report and guidelines.
Okay, now we're on.
Same thing.
What does it look like?
Same thing.
Again, it's stayed the same. Perhaps the most significant thing that we procured in the past year was outside legal counsel. Did that consistent with the process and policy, and that action is recorded here. In terms of any other procurement activity, there's nothing that is out of the prior year experience. For instance, our audit is under a multi-year contract with the same vendor that it's been for a number of years. And we continue to have the same banking relationships. So I don't think there's any significant change here to review.
Great. Then can I get a motion to approve our procurement report and guidelines, number 5? Can I get a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
So it's Supervisor Wild, seconded by Director Whitehead. Any discussion? Go ahead. Yes.
On the bottom of the first page there, under 1, it talks about the contracting officer of the corporation. Is that noted on who the contracting officer is? Did I miss that somewhere?
On A,
On B1, for the purchase of goods and proposals and so on and so forth, last sentence or next to is justified in writing by the contracting officer of the corporation. And then it's also on number 2. Would that be the chairperson, because you'd be signing these things?
I think in the past, I think what it has been is I think you were a signature to some things, and as well as myself.
Okay.
So that you were doing that as treasurer?
Right.
Right, okay.
Well, so there's some important things to include for context here. Typically, the contracting officer is whoever it is that's authorized to execute contracts on your behalf. In your bylaws, I don't know whether or not that's addressed. Because I was concerned to make sure that there was never any what I would consider to be misuse of that power, we instituted a 2-person signature rule where the EDC as your agent cannot execute any contract that is unusual or above a certain threshold without board co-signing along with it. So while I believe that you could name a contracting officer, even if we were to be determined to be your contracting officer, we don't execute anything without co-signatures from the board itself.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I should have done a little more research before I asked that question. On page 5 of our bylaws under chairman, he or she shall have the power to make and execute contracts in the ordinary business of the corporation and for and in the name of the corporation to execute with the secretary all deeds, mortgages, bond certificates, and other so on and so forth. So
So thank you.
you are.
So thank you, Supervisor. Thank you. Hey,
Sorry to delay the meeting.
good. No problem. So again, can I get a motion to approve our procurement report and guidelines? Get a motion to that effect.
I
I
think
think
already have a motion
You have the
second.
I
motion.
don't have
just
that
gotta vote on
motion.
it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved. And number 6, the approval of annual audit report.
Okay.
That's the one, page 1 to 27.
So what you have in front of you is essentially the pre-population. I guess we did this in draft format. It has not yet been submitted to the state. Director Whitehead raised a good question, I thought, about whether or not it was appropriate to provide you with that pre-populated. It's not clear to me whether that's always been the practice or not, but I think it's a good idea. So going forward, we will certainly endeavor to do that ahead of time, but we did get, I had the staff go ahead and pre-populate that last night and send that out to you, or yesterday afternoon, send that out to you late yesterday. So at least you'd have some opportunity to perhaps take a look at it. There's some debate here that we've certainly had about how to fill these out. I want to be clear about the fact that we operate at your direction. In the past, I don't know how assertive we were about that, because I never participated in the meetings when my predecessor was leading this organization. But if there's something that any of you or you as a board feel like would be better representative, as long as we share with you what information we have that's germane to that issue, we will submit anything that you direct us to submit. We have no particular agenda about all of this, except trying to make sure that we're being germane to the questions that the state asks and reflecting the actual reality of what we find. The majority of the debate has occurred around this idea of whether jobs created for organizations that the loans have either been in default or where the organization is no longer in place are there. It sounds like Director Whitehead got different direction than we did, although I don't know that we were talking to the same people. I did not ask the ABO, I asked the Office of the State Controller. But regardless, whatever is the will of the board, as long as you're fully ignorant of issues, we will. And I believe that as it stands right now, what you have is what we have submitted in the past, correct? You changed Superior Cantina to 0? Okay, so maybe in advance, they just already did it, Travis. But the most important part here is that all we're doing is putting information in front of you that we believe to be the best information that we have. What we do with it here is completely up to you.
Because we still can make corrections because it has not been submitted.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. Is there a motion on the floor, Linda?
No, you need to make a motion.
A motion to approve our annual audit report. Supervisor Wild,
Make a motion,
seconded
bring
by
it to the floor.
Supervisor Leggett. Any further discussion? Travis?
Yes, if I could, thank you. So I do appreciate these were pre-populated, so it's going to make this chore a whole lot easier for everybody. I went through everything, and I just have maybe a dozen notes here. Some of them are just to clarify my understanding of it. I would refer to page 2 of 27 to start. Question 7 says, has the board adopted bylaws and made them available to the board members and staff? Well, we have, and but I just like to ask that the one that we approved recently be the one that's on the website. Right now, the one that's on the website is dated 2011. And we have yet to see a clean, I have yet to see a clean copy of what we accepted, because there were some verbal changes just before the vote. So I would like to see those bylaws. So I don't have a problem with the way this is answered. I would just like to ask to get a copy of the bylaws. Question 14, was a performance evaluation of the board completed? It says yes. I'm not aware of a performance evaluation or being shared with any of us. It is good to be introspective about, how the board is running and et cetera, and I think it would help us all. I think it's something we should have. I don't remember ever discussing it. So maybe you could clarify that.
Do you want that answer now or later?
That would be good, and move on.
So we execute that process in the spring of every year. We have the board members that submitted their self-evaluation forms back to us. We compile them. We actually bring them back to a meeting to ensure that they're a part of the public record. And all that occurred either in May or June of last year.
I'll have to find out when that occurred, 'cause I don't have any recollection of that. I'll move on to the next
I
one.
think you actually filled out one of those forms.
Well, I did fill it out. I just never remember discussing it with anybody.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, in regards to the bylaws, any new forms that it needs to be filled out by the new board, I'll be sending out within the next 2 weeks. That includes getting a new packet like you got last year when you became on the board. So that includes getting a new copy of the bylaws. That means getting a new copy of the evaluation form. So
And then-
all that stuff will be coming out within the next 2 weeks
For the coming year.
for the coming year.
I think it's important. I think your question is fair, which is, number one, we need to make sure the bylaws that get posted are the current ones. I
Yep.
agree with that. And as far as the evaluation form, we'll make sure that we get you the compiled results of last year's evaluation as well.
And, you know, when that was discussed, the meeting at that was discussed at. Page 5, just, it mentions my name and has things here. I just would like to note that I am not ex officio, so that very last yes, I believe should be a no. And as far as term expiration date, I think for all of us, it's listed ex officio, but the term is 2 years, but at the pleasure of the sole member. I don't know what ex officio means in this context, so
It means you're not elected to the position.
it means you're,
You are named to the position. The definition that the state uses for this is to differentiate between those that are in the position by virtue of an elected position they hold, or those that are named to the position independent of whether or not they are elected officials. This is important because in last year's review of our bylaws and of the organizational processes, it became clear that a board member's term does not depend on whether or not they were still in an elected position. So even if somebody serves by virtue of the fact that they're a member of the Board of Supervisors, if they're no longer a member of the Board of Supervisors, they are still on the LDC board until they're either removed or they resign. And so the term ex officio is the way that the state uses to differentiate that type of arrangement.
my understanding of ex officio is different than yours, but we'll leave it at that.
And if I may interrupt and note, you're not the only one. We're all listed as ex officios.
This came about as the review that you helped initiate, or maybe you weren't a part of it. I don't know. It came about in the early review of the construct, including our bylaws, was done by the county attorney and then reviewed by other attorneys. And so all we're trying to, this is the same language we used last year in light of those determinations. So we're not changing anything here, but it came about as a formal legal review.
Okay, I mean, all I'm saying is I don't understand ex officio the way you understand it. And it's clear that the sole member has at his discretion to appoint us or to remove us at any point in time. And that unless otherwise spoken for, it's 2 years is the term. I mean, that's clearly what it says. To me, that would be a better description of what's going on as far as term expiration date than some word that I've never heard of. Perhaps when I looked it up on the internet last night, and what I read as a definition is different than what I just heard now. But that's, I'll let this pass. I don't need to dwell on this any longer. Just note on page 8 that no staff is listed, where in the past it has been. I don't know if you intend to fill that in, before you had the CEO and the CFO and the secretary, that was all listed as staff. On page 7, I guess it is, on our 7 and 8.
Huh.
So wanted to point that
I
out.
think we intended to do that. I don't know why it didn't populate.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
just want
But
to
it's
make,
done.
want to make note of it.
Yeah.
Page 10 through 12 just had zeros, and I assume you're going to put in the real data for that
Once it's approved, yes.
once it's approved. Page 21. So we're getting right through this. Page 20.
21?
Okay, page 21, Kirsch helmets. How many jobs are planned to be created? 7. How many jobs have been created to date? 15. And there was some additional documentation presented, which I appreciate. It was a Form 45 from the state, which indicated that that company had 15 employees. And I think that's where that number 15 came from. However, that number includes employees that are not necessarily at the facility that we have an agreement with, but are in their Scotia headquarters and their Scotia retail store. So I would like you to re-examine that number and see if that number is the appropriate number and, what notes you might have on that. Page 22, very similar. It says that New Way Lunch has 20 employees. I don't believe that the Warrensburg facility has 20 employees, though I might be wrong about that, but it doesn't seem right, and it's quite out of order from what it has said in the past. So I would like you to look into that and get back to us before this is,
We received the New York State 45 from them and sent that to you last night.
yes, and what I said is that the Form 45 includes all employees in the state of New York. Whereas this, and they have several restaurants in the state of New York, so that would include, all their other employees as well.
So the process, just for clarification, the process there, when they submit their New York State 45 and we go to populate the form, is we then ask them to differentiate that which is appropriate for that particular location. So they self-report that number, and then we validate that with the New York State 45. Go ahead.
On New Way Lunch, they only have one location that is open, and only one location that has been open for, I believe, 2 years now. So what she gave me, I would take as being correct.
So I think what's happened is that they've essentially consolidated their operations into that single storefront.
Okay, it doesn't look like this. Are there 20 employees there?
No,
No.
No.
So,
but we can talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, again, bring that to your attention and ask you to look at that. Now, these are the kinds of things that were brought up in the audit that we should be questioning. And I expect that we will get some answers back. Page 24 was that question that I had for a year now about what happens when a company, in this case Superior Cantina, goes out of business some years ago, and we used to be reporting under the line, if yes, how many jobs have been created to date? We had been reporting 6 for some period of time. It was my contention that it should be 0 because created to date certainly doesn't mean what was 3 years ago, but what is today, and they're out of business, and therefore it's 0. I thought that was clear enough. I would be happy to go ahead and forward to anybody the letters that I got, the emails that I got from the ABO that, basically said the same thing. Is not basically, they said specifically the number should be 0. So I appreciate that the 0 is in there. I think that's appropriate. I do have a question. When I looked at this, we only have 13 projects in this report. However, on our monthly sheet, we have 15 listed. And I would be wondering where Access Technologies and Stonecast, why they are not part of this, because, you know, we've been looking at them every month.
They were removed,
I think they've been removed for a number of years.
correct?
So both of them are in active legal proceedings.
Okay.
And have been in Stonecast's case, more than a decade.
Right, and the reason why they're still on the loan portfolio is because they have not been written off by the LDC.
And from my understanding, as a secondary question to the ABO over that issue of, you know, bankruptcy, I'm pretty sure, I'd have to go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure what they said is, yes, you need to keep reporting those until everything is finished. And if it's not finished, if we're still hoping to collect money, or if we've written it off completely, then I think it's finished. Then I don't know why we're
So-
seeing it from month to month.
So we asked these questions of the state controller when they went through our entire loan portfolio. What you see here is exactly what they suggested was the appropriate thing for us to report on.
Okay, so should we not be getting to see these every
Well,
month?
the reason we do it is because it's important to understand that in terms of the financial impact, you still have potential liability to write it down. It isn't because we believe there's any relevant activity. Quite honestly, if you go back to the meetings, you'll find that I've actively endorsed the idea of writing these down. But we have County Attorney Terwilliger, who's probably more familiar with both of these legal cases than anyone. There is still some possibility of recovery. And I think that's why we continue to keep them in your portfolio so that that opportunity is not lost. Do you have anything more you want to add about either Stonecast or Access Technologies?
I know with Access Technologies, he had been paying on a kind of a payment plan for a bit, paying back some of the money, the principal of that business,
He still continues.
and continues. So that one, we're not really actively pursuing any collection on it, because if he's paying, that's great on the loan. The Stonecast one, that case has been dormant for a while. It was in bankruptcy court, both for the business and the principal in it himself and his wife. And that's been stalling collection on anything with them. There was also a lot of litigation going on with Stonecast, and at one point Fordham University, and then with the insurance company, because Stonecast actually won in court down in New York City on a big case against Fordham. And that probably cost him a lot of money, I'm sure. And he was supposed to get paid from the insurance company. And the last litigation I've seen on that is they've been fighting with the insurance company to get payment on the bond that they were sort of told by the court to be paid on, when Fordham kind of tried to renege on the deal with him. So that's where that one's at.
So if I might, and get Mr. Terwilliger's opinion on this, this is exactly what they said. The ABO said to me, LDCs are required to provide information on all outstanding loans they have provided to entities until the terms of the loan have been completed. So what would that mean to you? How would you interpret that? Want me to say it again?
I would take it as terms of the loan completed. Either it's been paid back in full, or for some other reason, the loan has been, we say, written off or canceled or terminated in some way.
So we haven't reached that with either of those two yet.
No, Access Technologies is, I say he's paying towards the amount, which is good, and eventually we'll probably pay it off. Maybe not on the original terms, but it looks like it's being paid in some way to get paid off. And the Stonecast one, that one's involved in litigation with Stonecast and the insurance company to try to get money from the insurance on the construction bond, which if you got that money, yes, then he could use it towards paying the LDC's loan.
So the ABO, and we're submitting this report to the ABO, states that would seem that we should have those two on there. So I'm asking those two to be added, or, you know, given some reason why they shouldn't be. But there seems to be some disagreement, as you say, between what the state controller's office said, but this is being filed with the ABO.
Look, again, we will file whatever it is the will of the board. For the last several years, they have not been included, and we just went through a review with the state controller, and they validated that. And we specifically asked the question about whether or not we should include them. Part of the problem is when you include them and you haven't for prior years, you have to ask the question of whether you have to restate those prior year financials. And I specifically was concerned about that. And I asked them the question, does that mean that we need to restate to include these? And they said, no, they're reported because they're reported in another area of the report where we talk about active litigation. Now, I'm not saying that my interpretation or my understanding of that conversation is what we will submit. I'm only sharing with you what they shared with me. Whatever you choose to do, we will submit. But it may raise the question of whether or not we have to go back and essentially restate for any year that they were not included, even if that was at the direction of a state office.
So if I forward this email to you, could you take it upon yourself to bring those concerns to the ABO
Yes.
and then see what they say? And depending on what they say, I don't know if you have to pre-authorize you to, go along with what the ABO says, but I would hope we would go along with whatever the ABO says. That's
Yes. Also important to know that we've attempted to be as transparent as we possibly can be. That's why we report on it every single month to you. So there's no attempt for whether you or you as a board or the public to keep this information from being widely understood. It's simply a matter of what is it that the state wants us to file. Go ahead, Linda.
I just went back on the ABO website for 2019 that it's been certified. Access Technology is not on there. And what was the other one?
Stonecast.
okay.
No, I don't,
Stonecast. They
don't-
were not on there. They weren't submitted back in 2019.
I don't think there's any question that they haven't been submitted for a number of years because that's what I
Yeah.
raised. I think the only question is whether or not we should consider including them and whether we're cognizant of any implication of doing so.
And the ABO should be the authority on that, I believe, right? So I will forward you that email. You can use that as a jumping off point.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may add to this at this time, because this is something I brought up with the accountant yesterday. And it was a little bit out of the review of the audit, but it was a question. So this is nothing official from the company that performed the audit. But because it was a discussion on non-performing loans, do we continue to carry them on? When can we write them off? Because when you look at our balance sheet, we have $182,000 assigned for bad debt, and just was wondering when we should apply that. And pointing out these several cases that the accountant was aware of, said they're in litigation. So while they are in litigation, don't be too quick on writing them off. You're going to have to carry them along, but they are non-performing loans so that they end up in a different basket. And Director Whitehead brings out something from the ABO, but as from my own experience on asking questions of the OSC or the ABO or others, they respond specifically to what my question is. So they only have my context for it. And if the question is presented about, we have some non-performing loans that are in litigation, have been for years, how should we handle them? The answer may be a little bit different. I think the main point is that they're recognized somewhere in the annual report. And if they are recognized somewhere in the annual report, then it's transparent for all.
Just as an observation, Robert, in the case of Stonecast, is there a way we could just get a little bit of clarification as to where that stands, okay, legally? I mean, has the case conceivably been dismissed and we don't know about it? Is there litigation that, has the Fordham case been dismissed?
That's one I can look into and see. I haven't looked
Okay.
at that in quite a while now. So
Okay.
that's something I can find out what's going on and where and
Good.
and let you know.
Okay,
Definitely.
good. Thank you.
That ends my concern.
Well, thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Good. That ends our annual meeting of our Board of Directors.
Actually, sorry, Chairman, it does not. You actually, as a board, need to approve the 2021 audited financial statement.
Plus you want to put that one in.
Okay, that's
So
you wanna
the,
put in.
so the Audit and Finance Committee has brought it to you for recommendation to approve.
Do it
So
now.
now the full board needs to approve it.
So by resolution, the full
Before
board
the
needs to accept it, so we.
adjourn.
Oh,
can file
no,
it.
okay. So we,
I'll make that resolution.
thank you, Mike. Can we have a
Motion.
second on that? Supervisor Merlino, all those in favor?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what it was. I'm sorry, what are we doing?
The audited financials that have been recommended for approval by the Audit and Finance Committee have to be recognized by resolution by the board.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Very good. Is that it, Linda? Is that end of it?
That is the end. So then we need a motion to adjourn.
No, hold on.
Go ahead. Chief.
All right, and before the motion to adjourn, I'll go back to what we were talking about earlier.
Sure.
I would love to have a motion to keep Mr. Cipriano as our leader and make it official. So I'm making that as a motion, and I hope I get a second.
I will
I'll second that.
Okay,
seconded
Bob?
by, is that
Bob Landry.
Bob
Bob
Landry? Any discussion?
Yeah, I just, as far as discussion, I just do want to read right from the bylaws, Article 5, Section 7, which is what we're doing now. Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and/or employees. The Board of Directors may from time to time employ a Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, or other employees who, subject to the supervision of the Chairman of the Board of Directors, shall be either full or part-time and shall carry out the purposes of the corporation. Such employees shall receive such compensation as may be determined by the Board of Directors. So that is, I think, what we're fine.
Is
There's a
there a
motion.
compensation? Yeah. Will it include a compensation? No, right?
The only funds that are dispersed to the EDC are for administering without regard to what any staff officer is named. That's just for the administering of the revolving loan fund and of the day-to-day operations of the LDC. It's an unpaid role. It has no compensation attached. It's simply a matter of reflecting for purposes of legal documents, making commitments, working on your behalf to approve or bring loans to you, for instance, that whoever it is operating in your capacity.
But I think what he said, we can do it if we wanted to.
Well, I would certainly not want that.
Okay, that's fine.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor? Approved.
Now you need to, a motion to adjourn.
Can I get a motion to adjourn our annual meeting? Supervisor Leggett, seconded by Supervisor Wild. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that stopped at 12:09.
Good. Well, that's going to,
I'll give you these. This is one I.
Now we're on to our regular monthly meeting.
Yes.
Nothing
Now we,
saying that we have to
moving
do it.
forward, we're on to our March 17th normal meeting of our Warren County Local Development Corporation. Can I get a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of February 17th, 2022? So moved. So moved. Supervisor Leggett, second
Second.
Supervisor Wild. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The financial update, a review and approval of February 22. Finally got you, Diane.
We need a motion.
Well, it's
Carl.
gonna be short. Everyone has paid.
Did we,
Oh.
I'm sorry, did we get a motion on the minutes?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
We're good on that.
So she's going to review the financials and then you'll take up the approval of them separate.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
We received payment on all our current loans for the month of February. We also received payment for the outstanding invoice for the startup 80K. And that is the only activity that took place in the month of February.
Thank you. Any, can I get a motion to approve the financial statements of February 2022?
I'll make that motion.
Mike, Supervisor Wild, seconded by Supervisor Leggett. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diane. our draft corrective action plan. Supervisor Leggett. Where? I'm sorry.
It's
I'm
actually-
sorry. I'm sorry. It's Jim.
Close.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
So this is exactly the same plan that we submitted to you prior. We've reviewed this extensively with our own staff, with Chairman McDevitt, and we've had a cursory legal review about it as well. And I believe it is both responsive to every single point that the OSC raised. It's affirmative in the fact that we are addressing every single point. And is the basic philosophy of this is whatever suggestions were being made, then we endeavor to accept them and put them into practice. And what we were counseled by was, and quite honestly, this was informal from the OSC. They said, don't give us a 23-page plan. We don't need a 23-page plan. What we need is to understand whether or not you are either accepting or rejecting any of the suggestions or recommendations that we make. And if so, how would we know? So that's what we endeavored to do here.
Let me get a motion on the floor in order to engage any discussion if necessary. Get a motion to approve our draft corrective action plan. Supervisor Leggett, seconded by Supervisor Wild. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Good. Local land bank discussion. Craig.
Thank you. I wish I had more to report. We were supposed to have had a land bank roundtable yesterday, and it is postponed until next week. As I brought up at the last board meeting here, I've been involved with this discussion, and President Siplon has been on the last roundtable for the LDC, as well as our county planners. The concept of the land bank, just for a quick review, is that a foreclosing municipal unit, which would be a county that can foreclose on tax delinquent properties, is eligible to become a land bank. And as a land bank, they can take those properties from foreclosure, hold them, work with them, and then get them back into the open market by one means or another. So it is out of the 19 land banks that are operating in the state of New York right now, most of them are held by individual counties. There is one that covers the Mohawk region and has multiple counties. So this came through a discussion I had heard with the Adirondack North Country Association, and a discussion went out around the Adirondacks about this, and I raised my hand to include Warren County into the discussion, so we weren't left out, because it's not always recognized that Warren County is in the Adirondacks. And because housing is identified as being an important and a critical part to our economic development at this point in time, I would say we would all agree that it is really the weak link in our chain of production if we are here to produce jobs and economic vitality within our communities. A quick aside, several weeks ago, a young professional man, fresh out of college, fresh with a new job with a timber management organization that's in our area here, walked into my office looking for help on finding a place to live. So here is our prime demographic of what we are looking at. A young person coming into the workforce, new job, working for an existing organization, yet cannot find a place to live, has the job, has the means, has the education, does not have a place to live. We finally found one up in Essex County, but it's temporary. It just highlighted the situation that we are in. With a land bank, it's just one tool to address this overall problem. And it's a tool where local government can help in the broader effort. In order for a land bank to exist, you need to have the organization and staff and the funding to take care of it. And I would like to propose to the LDC here that the LDC take an active participation in exploring the formation of a land bank for Warren County. I would also bring this up to the chair of the Economic Development and Planning Committee as well, to consider that perhaps out of committee, it can be put forward to the full board and with discussion of the chair, that if this is a way to go. Warren County Planning Department had looked into land banks previously, years ago. It wasn't the time and place to form one. It may be the time and place to form one at this point in time. As we have just reapproved our mission in our annual reports here, it does talk about housing. So I think it is within the purview of the LDC to look at housing perhaps more now than ever. In the past, and as our loan portfolio shows, we have loaned money to businesses, either to start up or to expand. But we also have the ability to direct our monies into supporting a land bank program. That is all I have to report at the committee at this time. All I would look for is a consensus of whether to go forward with this idea, and then come back to any more formal resolution on what to do and how to do it.
Any discussion, communication?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was also attending that first meeting.
Sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to.
no reason to apologize. I think this is a good idea to pursue. I'm not sure all the details behind it because I just had a basic introductory to this technique. But as Supervisor Leggett mentioned, housing, we all know it's a major issue for us. And if this is one of the tools that we can come and use to help us with this issue, I'm all for it. So I'm not sure where we go. Mr. Ziplin may have some thoughts.
I have a couple of additional comments I wanted to point out, and it looks like Bob is also jumping in, which is wonderful to tap into his expertise here. But I participated not only in the same conversations, in the same groups with some of you, but in a number of independent ones with some of the peer organizations that do economic development across the state. And important to understand, there is a finite number of land banks that have been approved by the legislature. And I believe there's 9 that are left. And there is a bit of a move for those that don't currently have one to consider it. So I believe that this is not something where I believe the opportunity will remain for us without action by the legislature to expand that list, probably by the end of the year. There is precedent for doing it regionally. It does add complication in terms of how it's administered. Both formats are viable though, and are delivering value, whether it's an independent or say county by county organization, or it's a collective. I do think that who runs it and where that expertise is probably one of the more fundamental questions. And one thing I wanted to point out to you is it's one of several things that we're exploring, all pointed at how could we potentially help in housing. Another best practice that we're exploring is the idea of developing a matching fund to attract developers to propose projects. The cost of doing pre-engineering, pre-site work, and the risk associated with doing that and not having it be accepted is oftentimes a limiter, particularly for entities that are operating outside of their home base or region. We have a finite number of developers here that work. They're already fully engaged, primarily in high-end housing around the lake. If we're going to be able to develop this, we're going to have to be able to bring developers from south of here. We believe so strongly in this that we're modifying at the EDC our own construct of the board to reach south into some of these organizations. And you'll see as our board recomprises itself over the coming year, some of those people will start to populate the EDC board so we can develop those relationships. But it used to be that we competed for businesses by offering incentives to attract a business. We're now competing in many ways to try to get those construction and development entities that are finite, and entities are, communities are competing against each other. That's another tool we could potentially use. And then the third is that both the state and federal level, there are funding grants that are coming where some amount of seed money in order to match that grant would be necessary. I met with a number of housing related organizations over the last week, including one yesterday, that has a fairly well-formed plan to go after state funding for a combination of affordable and workforce housing in Warren and Washington County, and perhaps even in Saratoga County. But they would need some amount of community matching funds in order to make that work. What I propose is that we bring all three of these ideas into a standing agenda item for at least the next few meetings, where we report on the developments of all of them. We give whatever primer we can about how any of these might work. I'm working actively to try to find people who would speak to us, who are either operating them or can provide insight to how they operate in other places, so that we can educate ourselves with the intention of being able to choose one or more of them during the course of the year. I had hoped to do this last year. The difficulty, though, was that those entities were reluctant to speak. I don't know why, but I couldn't get any of them to commit to actually coming and talking to this group. However, they do seem to be more receptive, particularly on the land bank side. I think we've got entities that would be happy to jump in and provide us with a 20-minute tutorial on how they work and answer any questions. I'm working actively to fulfill potential outside expertise that we could bring to this meeting on the other two.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Please,
may,
go ahead.
one thing that just popped into my head. A few months ago, I had a conversation with a major developer about our housing issue. And one of the things that he mentioned that stood out is they just need the land. We can help them find the land. They can come in and find investors to help make some of this happen. So, sorry, this was just a connection that I made from months ago, but this might be really the way to go here. Thank you.
Bob wants to talk too.
Director Landry, did you have a comment?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Leggett, I would appreciate it if you would keep me in the loop when you have those meetings in regards to land banks. My comment will be this: as I left the housing industry, the housing industry was in the process of discussing land bank issues more often than they ever had before. I agree with your thoughts about utilization of those for addressing of possible housing issues. So I'd like to be kept in that loop. The other comment that I'll make is you're absolutely right, Jim, about outside developers coming into the area. In my involvement with the Glens Falls Housing Authority, we ended up attracting a developer out of the Long Island area who came up here and actually got involved in a $70 million project with the Glens Falls Housing Authority, but is now kind of reaching out and wanting to take a look at some of the possible development options that they may be interested in up here. So I think your efforts are directed in the right place. And I'd like to see some further discussion or more active discussion about land banks.
Thank you very much, Bob. Travis.
Yeah, yes, I too would like to see more discussion. Because we do need to do something other than, what we've been doing is loans, and we haven't been doing a whole lot of them. There were a total of 6 loans made in the last 5 years. One of them to Nettle Metals, and that's worked out well. But there are other places they can go to too. There are many competing organizations to this. And unless we have something special, I don't know if it's worth the expense and trouble that we're going through to keep this alive. So I very much would like to see us be more relevant and to make better use of the near $2 million in taxpayer money that we're trying to put into use, and it's basically just sitting there. Maybe someone else is more effective. But all these things ought to be discussed. And in particular, I welcome hearing more about this land bank and other opportunities that we might be able to get involved.
Thank you, Travis. Gene,
And I don't want to sound, can I get a little bit of a definition? I think I know what a land bank is, but it's just, I mean, I think it's a lot of financial assistance someplace, and where will the money come from?
If I may.
please.
I have heard several examples. We'll take one that was out in Onondaga County, right, which includes the city of Syracuse. And they were having a problem with what would be called, and I would term, zombie properties, foreclosed. So coming up to foreclosure, a land bank can receive those from the county. And then they have the ability to get in there, renovate them, bring them up to code, and then sell them back onto the open market. And when that happens, county gets paid back taxes owed, so that's taken care of. And also what happens is that the land bank is able to sell those at a very competitive price because their initial cost was low. They're just putting in the money for the renovations. So that's where the finances come in, is the money to be able to front, to be able to rehab these buildings and get them back out onto the market. And a lot of that from the sale of those comes back to replenish the bank account of the land bank. You do need initial startup money. That's what it takes. Also, it takes a staff to work through all of this, as you can imagine, to identify the properties, organize the work, make sure it's done, and take it through to sale. So for a county like Warren County, I would imagine it would take 2 or 3 people to be able to get this started up and moving. This was one of the reasons why we joined in a regional approach instead of having Clinton, Franklin, Essex, and Warren County each developing their own with their own administration, office, and overhead. All of that administration could be consolidated in one larger office that's supported by much larger property base in there. If that doesn't happen, I think Warren County would look at the feasibility of starting our own. Do we have enough properties coming on that would be available to make this worth it, and have that efficiency of operation? But that's pretty much how it works.
Maybe I can help a little. These are high friction properties. The marketplace already has flippers who are essentially taking properties that are available via auction that they think that they can turn quickly.
Right, that's what.
These are the properties that don't get picked up by that. So there is some amount of what you might consider to be investment here and potentially subsidy. The question is whether there's value to the community to get those pieces of housing potential back into stock. So generally a land bank is a way for a county to fill the gap between the market and idle properties. And it does come at a cost, and that's what I'd like to bring to you. I mean, it's not just staff. There's risk, just like in a loan, that you'll take on a property and not be able to recover it. Although from what we gathered, that's very unusual in today's market.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? So we're going to leave it that we're going to report back at our next meeting and give us an update. Okay. Jumping on then to number 6, Jim. Carry on.
We had no new foils since the last time we met. The updated sheet is in your packet. I did include for your review and input, the RFQ that we're proposing to go out to the legal community for to seek additional options for legal support for the LDC. I'd also like to share with you that I had a conversation with County Administrator Moore, and he's indicated to me that he would also speak with the new county attorney about where are the areas for potential support that could be appropriate from the county. So I don't have an answer yet back from that, but I think some combination, ideally, and this the input that I provided to him is that my own perception is that a taxpayer here would like to know where there is an overt conflict of interest. They'd like to know that they're protected from that, and where there is a clear opportunity for synergy, that they're being given an opportunity to get the benefit of that from a cost standpoint. And that's a continuum. And what we've done is go from one extreme to the other extreme. And I'd really like to see if we could find ourselves somewhere in the middle. He was receptive to that. I think that there is great potential here to not only receive some amount of support around what I would consider to be things that the county is particularly well suited to, like open meetings or public disclosures and some of the things that they're already deeply involved in. If they don't involve an overt conflict, I think there's an opportunity there. It's also been a place we've struggled in terms of getting responsiveness from the legal community. There are areas where we would want support, particularly around arcane financial transactions, very difficult and protracted bankruptcies or legal proceedings. I think it may serve us to have that. And I do think it makes sense for us to have the backdrop of a third-party legal counsel that could support us in the case where we either can't get what we need from the county support, or where the question is one that is unique enough that an independent opinion may be required. But to start that, I'd love to have your input about the way that, and it's very general. We took a previous RFQ that went out for legal support and modified it to some extent, but there may be some specifics you want to put in, but we specifically made it as general as possible to see if we could garner interest from attorneys, both local and regionally, that may be interested in providing some amount of legal support. The way an RFQ works, just most of you probably already understand this, but the idea would be anybody who agreed to this would enter into a roster that we could potentially procure their services for. So we're not necessarily selecting an attorney. We're building a roster of potential resources we could tap. So between now and the next meeting, I would welcome your direct feedback to us as a staff about any of your thoughts that we could use to modify this. I'd like to bring this, once we're at a place you feel comfortable by resolution, we'd like you to approve it so we can bring it out to the marketplace. And hopefully we can do that by the next meeting. We've put in a schedule of all the remaining meetings just for your own purposes. I know sometimes the various software programs, we have problems where sometimes we notice you 7 times for the same meeting, and sometimes we think we've noticed you and it doesn't. So we're going to continue to try to give you, a sheet every time so you can put in yourself or make sure that you see the invitations for all of the meetings for the remainder of the year. The loan portfolio has no significant changes from the previous month, but I did provide you with the most current version. And then the last thing I'd just like to talk about is the fact that I feel like it's important that we share with you the overriding philosophy of the EDC and what I consider to be our role in the larger economic development community. I read with interest some of the things that were said this morning, Director Whitehead, in the article about the Lake Champlain, Lake George Planning Board's award. I believe, and I believe that the board of the EDC believes, that there's never been a time where the community is more in need of robust support to define its both economic and collective future. I oftentimes ask elected officials wherever I go, how do you know that your current local economy is sustainable 20 years from now? What gives you confidence that you will have the people you need to staff the public organizations you have, your schools, that you'll have a business community that is balanced, that you'll have a population demographically and a tax base that can continue to provide the support that's required? It's a hard question to answer. The economy that we're operating in is fundamentally different than the one that we had even 2 or 3 years ago. The vast majority of people no longer work in an office, or if they do, they don't work full-time in that office. They can go anywhere they want. Many of them have chosen to move here. Many of them want to move here. We have to ask ourselves whether we want them to move here. Businesses no longer are locating based on the best tax advantage or financial package they can get. They're doing it almost exclusively on their reach to resources and workforce. They're repatriating from foreign soils back to the US because of supply chain issues. And when they do that, they're walking into the greatest labor shortage that has existed in our lifetime. So they go where the people are. If we're going to solve these problems, which are vexing problems and are going to be with us for the rest of our lives, we need every single organization that can add value to that to be aligned and working together. We are not competing with the Lake Champlain, Lake George Planning Board. We are complementary to it. We may not be meeting our full potential as an LDC, but I believe that we have a desire to find the niche that we uniquely can provide. And I think this community is best served when they do what they do best and we do what we do best. And we talk to each other constantly about how those things are aligned and synergetic together. I called Beth Giles this morning and I said, I don't think it was your intention to say that you want to operate the LDC. I think it was your intention to say that you want to continue to do whatever it is in the community's interest. And that's our intention too. I also spoke with Dave O'Brien, who leads the Warren Washington County IDA. I don't believe there's ever been more dialogue between these organizations. We meet monthly to talk to each other about each other's mission and what we can do together and what we can do independently to ensure that we do what is needed. And oftentimes we don't know what's needed. So it takes all of our mind power just to try to figure out where to go and who's going to look at what options and then report back to each other. Brookfield, a company that basically relocated their core operations from Massachusetts to upstate New York, came to the EDC initially. And we quickly realized that what would speed their plan is to immediately put them in contact with the IDA and to get the benefits that are associated with the IDA in play so that they could start their construction while we sorted out many of these other issues. I think it's a perfect example of how this works best. If the IDA was also responsible for the things that this LDC does or for what the Lake Champlain Board does or what the EDC does, I'm not so sure that would have happened. That organization didn't think that it had a tax need. But it came to us looking for general support and we helped them find it. So I share with you the fact that I know that the last year or two has been incredibly frustrating. It has been for me. I'm sure it has been for you. We're not quite sure whether the programs we had in the past are the right ones. We're not quite sure whether or not the way we do it is the right way, but we are needed. This money is needed. We don't need less of us. We need all of us. And we need all of us operating at our best versions of ourselves. That's the way we're approaching this until you tell us that you don't want us anymore. That's all I have.
Good, thank you. Travis?
Yeah, if I can respond to that to clarify what my feelings are. I'm glad to hear that you do work with all these organizations, and I know you do. The point I am making is that all year long, we struggled to try to do something, and we did nothing as far as providing loans, which seems to be the only avenue we had last year, even though there was some discussion about, well, can we get involved with housing? We even scheduled a meeting for housing at one point. You canceled that meeting and then you never rescheduled it. And that was many months ago. The point is, all we are doing is loans. Loans can be done by other organizations. All of these organizations have carrying costs to them. You will be billing us $60,000 a year for your services to maintain this thing.
50,000.
well, your budget was 60. You thought 50 was not enough. 50, 60, it's still a nice number. The county, does not pay that kind of money to the regional planning board. And yet the regional planning board in one quarter has put out more loans than we put out in the last 5 years. So and this was during COVID, as well. So I do not, I bring this up to challenge this organization, not to, all I'm saying is we need to do better. We need to do better. This is the taxpayers' money that we're entrusted with, both year after year with the money that we get from the county, this $50,000. And the $2 million that's sitting there from years past that needs to be put into action. And I don't disagree with you that there is action needed. I agree with what I hear about land banks and everything else. Sounds like it's interesting. There's the challenge, get it going. Because for a year, I've sat here and I've seen nothing. You've even struggled with, getting past open meeting laws. In fact, today, I can tell you again that the minutes from last meeting have not yet been posted. You have to get them up in 2 weeks. It's been 4. These are the things, is it nitpicking? Yes. But I've nitpicked at this for months and months and months, and it still doesn't get corrected. That tells me there's a bigger problem. So, I am concerned. I'll be continuing to be critical of what I see here because I want to make sure that the taxpayer is getting the best bang for the buck. And we don't need an EDC, LDC on every corner. You don't see a coffee house on every corner because they aren't going to survive. Just because we have tax money, some people don't regard tax money as being that important. To me, it's very important. So that's where I'm coming from, and it's a challenge, is all it is. I'd love to see us be better next year.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As I mentioned prior to the meeting, I do have another conflict in a few minutes, but this debate has been going on for some time. The conditions that we've had over the last 2 years, COVID has been free loans, free grants to everyone. So to condemn this organization for not giving any loans, I think is totally inappropriate. It's misrepresenting the facts. We have spent the last year, in my opinion, redoing the way we operate, going into the minutia of what's this rule, what's that rule, instead of focusing on what we could do for the local economy and local businesses. So I just want to put it straight for everyone's mind that it's much more complicated than a coffee shop on each house. These organizations do talk. I am a member of the LDC. I talk to all these guys. And as a matter of fact, the Adirondack Regional Chamber is part of that discussion from time to time also. We do have people that work together, and it's important that they continue to work together, and they do bring different things to the table. I originally, before I became more involved in what's going on, had similar opinions than Director Whitehead. But now that I'm engaged, I truly believe that it's appropriate for us to continue to see what these organizations can do together instead of breaking them apart. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I do have to leave for
Thank you
my
very much.
prior meeting.
Any further discussion? That being said, Jim, do you have anything else to say? Any input? Good. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Supervisor Merlino, second by Supervisor Whitehead. All those in favor? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just in time.
Can you went with me and see what I'm supposed to do, whatever you want to?